Respects to the traditional guardians of this land, represented by Elder Nick Abraham. Thank you for your welcome. Excellencies, Vice Chancellors, Professors, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Australia has a tendency to keep rediscovering Africa. I know that because I've now lived some decades. I grew up in Tanzania, of Australian parents, came to Australia for my tertiary education at Sydney University, joined Foreign Affairs, served in Nairobi, was High Commissioner in Nigeria, served with the Commonwealth Secretariat, was Ambassador in Zimbabwe, Assistant Secretary for Africa, and then First Assistant Secretary for Middle East and Africa, and most recently Ambassador in the Netherlands. So after a few years away, I'm returning to Africa through this wonderful conference. It's so good to see it thriving despite the challenges of COVID. And I want to really pay respects to John Hearn and his team, both in Africa and Australia, who have done this. When I came back from the Commonwealth Secretariat in 2009, Australia was running for the Security Council. Incidentally, we're running again. This could be good for Africa-Australia relations. But we had lost very badly back in 1996. As a young officer, I was involved in that campaign, and it was clear, I did the analysis on this, that it was Africa and our lack of engagement with Africa, our shutting of posts, our cutting back of development assistance. And we were fortunate enough to have a West Australian as Foreign Minister in Stephen Smith, now our High Commissioner in London, still very actively engaged. And he got me to run an Africa task force to come up with a new Africa policy. And I have to say, I think the Rudd-Gillard government was the high point of our relations with Africa. We entered into diplomatic relations with all African countries. These all came from the recommendations of the task force. We actually, and we were expanding our development assistance at that time, hoping to reach 0.5%. I regret to say we're only at 0.2% of GNI at the present time, well below the OECD average of 3.5%. So the Australian government has to do a lot on development support, not just in Africa, where it gives virtually nothing now, but more generally as well, and Africa will benefit from that because we do need some development support in Africa. And you've heard about the Australian awards that thankfully still continue, but need to be expanded again, because that was another key recommendation, expanding the Australia awards, which were minimal at the time. We now have an alumni of well over 1,000 people out of those awards, and I always say they benefit Australian universities even more in some ways than they benefit Africa. So let's work for it. Let this be a lobby group for the expanding the Australian awards. When Ridwan Jadat is here, I know all the Australian High Commissioners in Africa, we have some of them here, will be very supportive of that. So that's one thing we need to do. We eventually set up an advisory group on Australia-Africa relations. And that was to harness groups like AAUN, the ADU, the African diaspora. That has gone. We need something. We need a Council on Australian-African Relations or something similar. It is amazing to see the growth of the African diaspora in Australia over the last 10 years. Wonderful to see you, Honourable, as a representative of that in Parliament. But in the National Parliament, we have more people born in Africa than ever before as well. And I think this diaspora needs to be harnessed more. We need a council of some form that harnesses those voices and builds that cooperation. So lobby for it. We need it back. We had an Australia-Africa leadership dialogue, a really significant one. I remember I was ambassador in Zimbabwe at the time with Julie Bishop coming over, still a shadow foreign minister. And Julie Bishop, when the government in it changes, as it inevitably and rightly does in Australia, was quite a champion in much more straitened circumstances for the relationship with Africa. In fact, it was Julie who, at an AGAR meeting, suggested to us we use the term Australia-Africa Week. So I'm glad to see that is still happening. As the Chancellor of the university I now I represent here, She has been a very dynamic force and is still a champion for us as well. Incidentally, I am aware ANU is not yet a member of AAUN. We're working on it, and I will be providing a report from this meeting, listening to the voices there, and I am very confident that you'll have ANU as a body that will also join with this. And there are other places. We heard the Zimbabwean ambassador. I think the University of Zimbabwe is not yet a member of AAUN. Looking forward to that, of course, with my background in Zimbabwe. So there is much to be done. Now, let me say, there are some encouraging signs from the Albanese government, not least with Tim Watts, the Assistant Minister's travels to Africa. He has committed, he said, the Australian government is reinvigorating our relationship with Africa. African nations are an influential voice of matters of importance for Australia, our region, the world. Africa also represents important trade diversification opportunities. I understand Tim Watts will make it here on Friday, and I think it's time now to put some substance behind that commitment. There is lots to be done. I'm encouraged, in fact, because I was contacted by the Deputy Secretary responsible for Africa, among other things, just before I came here. And he said, we want to have some advice from you on this. And I was obviously flattered by that. But what I want to do while I'm here this week is listen to African voices, all of your voices, so that it can help inform me in my recommendations. It's not a question of what's just in the past, it's a question of the future as well. Those who know me know I like my African proverbs, and there's one that says, a good day starts in the morning. We are still in the morning of the new Australian government. Let's make it a good day and start in the morning with a new Africa policy. Help us construct that. Thank you all.